The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the weathered wooden station in Helena, Montana territory. And Catherine Murphy knew her life was about to change forever, though she had no idea how profoundly the man waiting inside would alter her fate. She pressed her palm against the window, watching dust settle around the wheels as her heart hammered against her ribs. 3 weeks of bone-rattling travel from Boston had brought her here to this rough frontier town in the summer of 1878, where mountains rose like ancient sentinels in the distance, and the air smelled of pine and possibility. Catherine had answered an advertisement for a mail-order bride, corresponding with a rancher named Thomas Whitfield for 6 months before making this journey. But Thomas Whitfield would not be the man who would change everything. The driver opened the door, and Catherine hesitated. Her right foot, twisted inward since birth, throbbed from the long journey. The clubfoot had been her constant companion, her source of shame, and the reason she remained unmarried at 23 when most women her age already had children. Thomas knew about her condition. She had been honest in her letters, perhaps too honest, but she refused to deceive the man who might become her husband. He had written back that it did not matter, that he needed a wife, and she seemed kind and educated. "Miss," the driver said, offering his hand. Catherine gathered her dark green traveling dress and accepted his help, stepping down carefully. Her right foot landed awkwardly and she stumbled. The driver caught her elbow and she saw pity flash across his weathered face. That look. She knew it well. "Thank you," she said, lifting her chin. She had learned long ago to meet the world with dignity, even when it stared at her differently. The station was a simple wooden structure with a covered porch. Several men stood there, watching the new arrivals. Catherine scanned their faces, looking for Thomas Whitfield. He had described himself as tall with brown hair and a thick beard. She saw no one matching that description. A woman in a faded calico dress approached. "You must be Miss Murphy. I am Agnes Fletcher. I run the boarding house. Mr. Whitfield sent word that he cannot come to town today. A fence broke and his cattle scattered. He asked that you stay at my establishment until he can fetch you tomorrow." Catherine's stomach sank. She had traveled 3,000 miles and he could not even meet her, but she forced a smile. "Of course. I understand ranch emergencies." Agnes Fletcher's eyes drifted to Catherine's foot, then quickly away. "Let me help with your trunk." Before Catherine could respond, a tall figure stepped forward from the shadows of the porch. "I will get it." Catherine found herself looking up at a man who seemed carved from the Montana mountains themselves. He stood well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders straining against a worn chambray shirt. His hair was the color of dark honey, falling slightly over his forehead beneath a dusty brown Stetson. But it was his eyes that caught her. They were the color of the sky just before sunrise, a deep blue-gray that seemed to see straight through her. "Marcus Montgomery," he said, tipping his hat. "I work the ranch next to Whitfield's place." He moved past her to where the driver was unloading luggage, and Catherine noticed the easy confidence in his stride, the way he lifted her heavy trunk as though it weighed nothing. He carried it to a wagon bearing the words "Fletcher Boarding House" painted on the side. "Much obliged, Marcus," Agnes said. "Miss Murphy, if you will come with me." Catherine limped toward the wagon, trying to minimize her uneven gait, but knowing it was impossible to hide. She felt Marcus Montgomery's eyes on her, and her cheeks burned. When she reached the wagon, she faced the challenge of climbing up. The step was high, and her clubfoot made such maneuvers difficult. She gripped the side of the wagon and tried to pull herself up, but her foot slipped. She tried again, embarrassment flooding through her. Before Agnes could move to help, strong hands encircled her waist, lifting her effortlessly onto the wagon seat. Marcus Montgomery set her down gently, his touch respectful but firm. "There you are, Miss Murphy." "Thank you," Catherine managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Their eyes met for a moment, and she saw no pity there, only a quiet intensity that made her breath catch. He stepped back, touching his hat brim again. "Welcome to Helena, Miss Murphy. I hope Montana treats you well." Then he turned and walked toward a large buckskin horse tied to the hitching post, mounting with the fluid grace of a man born to the saddle. Catherine watched him ride away, dust rising behind the horse's hooves, and felt an inexplicable sense of loss. Agnes climbed up beside her and took the reins. "Marcus is a good man," she said, as though reading Catherine's thoughts. "Best horseman in the territory. Has a ranch about 5 miles north of here. Not as big as Whitfield's spread, but he has built it himself from nothing. Been here 4 years. Catherine did not know why she wanted to hear more, but she found herself asking, "Is he married?" "No." Agnes clicked her tongue at the horses, and the wagon lurched forward. "Though not for lack of interested women, he keeps to himself mostly. Works hard, goes to church on Sundays. Helps neighbors when they need it, but he has never courted anyone that I know of." They rode through the main street of Helena, and Catherine studied the town that would be her new home. False fronted buildings lined the dusty road. She saw a general store, a blacksmith, a saloon with tinny piano music drifting through the swinging doors, a church with a white steeple, and various other establishments. People moved along the wooden boardwalks, and several turned to stare at the stranger in the wagon. The boarding house sat at the edge of town, a 2-story structure with a wide porch and lace curtains in the windows. Agnes helped Catherine down, and this time Catherine managed without assistance, though her leg ached terribly. Inside, the house smelled of bread and lemon polish. Agnes showed her to a small but clean room on the 2nd floor with a window overlooking the mountains. "Supper is at 6, Agnes said. "I will bring hot water for washing." When she left, Catherine sank onto the bed and removed her boot, massaging her misshapen foot. The bone had never formed correctly, twisting inward so that she walked on the outer edge of her foot. Doctors in Boston had tried various braces and treatments, but nothing helped. She had learned to accept it, though the pain was constant and her mobility limited. She thought about Thomas Whitfield and felt a strange absence of emotion. She should be excited, nervous, hopeful about meeting her future husband. Instead, she found her mind returning to Marcus Montgomery's blue-gray eyes and the way he had lifted her without hesitation, without revulsion. She shook her head. Such thoughts were foolish. She had come here to marry Thomas Whitfield, and that was what she would do. That evening, Catherine came downstairs for supper. Agnes served beef stew and fresh bread to 5 boarders, 4 men and Catherine. The men were polite but curious, asking about her journey and her plans. She explained about being a mail-order bride for Thomas Whitfield, and they nodded knowingly. "Whitfield is a hard worker," one man said, "but he is not much for people, keeps to his ranch mostly." Catherine absorbed this information with some unease. Her correspondence with Thomas had been cordial but never warm. He had written of practical matters, the need for a woman to cook and keep house, perhaps bear children. She had hoped for affection to grow, but now she wondered. That night, she lay in the unfamiliar bed listening to unfamiliar sounds. Somewhere a coyote howled. The wind whispered through the pines, and she thought about strong hands lifting her into a wagon and eyes the color of dawn. The next morning, Catherine dressed carefully in her best day dress, a soft blue cotton that matched her eyes. She brushed her brown hair until it shone and pinned it up carefully. She wanted to make a good impression on Thomas Whitfield. But when a wagon arrived at 10 o'clock, it was not Thomas Whitfield who stepped down. It was Marcus Montgomery. Catherine stood on the porch, confusion, and something that felt dangerously like hope fluttering in her chest. "Mr. Montgomery," he approached, holding his hat in his hands. "Miss Murphy, Thomas Whitfield sent me to fetch you. He is still dealing with his cattle situation and asked if I would bring you to his ranch." "Oh," Catherine tried to hide her disappointment. What kind of man sent someone else to collect his bride? Marcus seemed to read her thoughts. His jaw tightened. "I apologize on his behalf, Miss Murphy. It is not right. But you came anyway. He is my neighbor, and you should not be left waiting." He paused, his eyes searching her face. "Your trunk is still here." "Yes, I will load it." Within minutes, they were ready to leave. Marcus helped Catherine into the wagon with the same easy strength as before, and they set off north out of Helena. The wagon rolled along a rutted road that wound through valleys of waving grass and stands of pine. Mountains rose on all sides, their peaks still white with snow even in July. "It is beautiful here," Catherine said, breaking the silence. "It is." Marcus kept his eyes on the road. "Hard country, but beautiful. Where are you from?" "Boston. My father was a clerk. He died 2 years ago. My mother died when I was young." "I am sorry." "What about you, Mr. Montgomery?" "Marcus, please." He glanced at her briefly. "I am from Ohio originally, came west after the war. You fought?" "Yes, Union Army." He did not elaborate, and something in his voice suggested those memories were painful. They rode in companionable silence for a while. Catherine studied him from the corner of her eye, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hands held the reins with confidence and ease. He seemed utterly at home in this wild landscape. "May I ask you something?" Catherine said finally. "Of course. Why did you really come to get me?" "You could have told Thomas no." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and honest. "Because no woman should arrive in a strange place and be left alone, because it was the right thing to do, and because—" He stopped. "Because—" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Catherine felt her breath catch. "Because when I saw you yesterday, struggling with that wagon step, holding your head high despite the pain you were clearly in, I thought you were the bravest person I had ever seen." Catherine's throat tightened. No one had ever called her brave. Pitiable, unfortunate, handicapped, but never brave. "I am not brave," she whispered. "I am just doing what I must. That is the definition of brave." They said nothing more for several miles, but something had shifted between them, some invisible thread connecting them. Eventually, Marcus turned the wagon onto a narrower path. "Whitfield's ranch is about 2 miles this way. Mine is just over that ridge." He pointed to a line of hills to the west. Catherine felt a strange reluctance for this journey to end. Once they reached Thomas Whitfield's ranch, her fate would be sealed. She would marry him and become a rancher's wife, and she would probably never see Marcus Montgomery again. The thought filled her with unexpected sadness. The Whitfield ranch appeared around a bend, a cluster of buildings including a small cabin, a barn, and several corrals. Cattle grazed in the distance. Everything looked neat and well-maintained, but there was a stark quality to it, an absence of warmth. A man emerged from the cabin as they approached. He was tall and thin, with a scraggly brown beard and eyes that seemed too close together. He wore dirty work clothes and did not smile as Marcus brought the wagon to a stop. "You are Catherine Murphy," he said without preamble. "Yes," Catherine tried to smile. "Mr. Whitfield. That is right." He looked her up and down, his gaze cold and assessing. "Montgomery, help her down." Marcus set the brake and came around to Catherine's side. She saw something in his face, a tightness around his mouth, and when he lifted her down, his hands lingered on her waist for just a moment longer than necessary. Catherine stood before Thomas Whitfield, acutely aware of how her foot turned inward, how she stood unevenly. He stared at it for a long moment. "You did not lie in your letters," he said. "I will give you that. It is worse than I imagined, but I suppose it does not matter for cooking and cleaning." Catherine felt as though she had been slapped. Marcus moved closer to her, his presence protective. "Show some respect, Whitfield," Marcus said, his voice low and dangerous. "Mind your business, Montgomery. She is my bride." Thomas turned to Catherine. "I have prepared a room for you in the cabin. We will be married tomorrow in town. The preacher is available at 2 o'clock tomorrow." "So soon?" Catherine's head spun. "I thought we might spend some time getting to know each other first." Thomas shrugged. "What is there to know? You need a husband, I need a wife. Let us not pretend this is a love match." The casual cruelty of his words struck Catherine like a physical blow. She had not expected romance, but she had hoped for basic kindness. Marcus stepped forward, his body tense. "Catherine, you do not have to do this." The use of her first name, so intimate and warm, made her eyes sting with tears. But what choice did she have? She had no money, no family, nowhere else to go. She had traveled 3,000 miles for this. "I will be fine," she said, though her voice shook. "Thank you for bringing me, Marcus." Their eyes met, and she saw anger and helplessness warring in his face. Then Thomas grabbed her trunk from the wagon bed, and Marcus reluctantly climbed back onto the wagon seat. As he drove away, Catherine watched until the wagon disappeared around the bend. Only then did she turn to face Thomas Whitfield and her future. The cabin was sparse inside, with rough wooden furniture and little decoration. Thomas showed her to a small back room with a narrow bed. "You will sleep here until we are married. After that, you will share my room. I expect 3 meals a day, the house kept clean and no complaining. I do not tolerate weakness." Catherine nodded, fighting to keep her composure. "There is a chicken coop behind the barn. Gather eggs for breakfast. We eat at 6. He left without another word. Catherine sat on the bed and let the tears come. What had she done? She had traded one lonely existence for another, except this one came with a man who looked at her with barely concealed contempt. She thought about Marcus Montgomery and the kindness in his eyes, the way he had called her brave, and she cried harder because she knew she would never see him again. That night, Catherine made supper from the meager supplies in the pantry. Thomas ate without speaking, shoveling food into his mouth mechanically. He did not thank her. When she cleared the plates, he went outside to check on the livestock, leaving her alone. She washed the dishes and prepared for bed, every part of her aching. Her foot throbbed terribly from the long day. She removed her boot and stocking, massaging the twisted limb, wishing desperately that she was back in Boston, back in the familiar poverty and loneliness that at least did not come with cruelty. The next morning, Catherine woke at dawn to the sound of Thomas banging around in the kitchen. She dressed quickly and limped out to find him scowling. 6 o'clock, I said. It is already past. I am sorry. I did not have a clock. That is no excuse. Get breakfast started. Catherine cooked eggs and bacon, moving as quickly as her foot allowed, but Thomas complained it was too slow. After breakfast, he told her to clean the cabin while he worked outside. She scrubbed and swept, trying to bring some order and warmth to the stark space. Around noon, Thomas came in and announced they would leave for town at 1 o'clock for the wedding. Catherine's heart sank. This was really happening. In a few hours, she would be legally bound to this cold, critical man. She changed into her best dress, a dove-gray silk she had saved for this occasion. She did her hair and tried to summon some feeling of a bride, but all she felt was dread. The ride to town was silent. Thomas drove the wagon with grim determination, his face set in hard lines. Catherine watched the landscape roll past and thought about running, but where would she go? They arrived at the small white church at the edge of Helena. The preacher, An elderly man with kind eyes greeted them warmly. Agnes Fletcher was there as a witness, along with the general store owner. "Let us begin," the preacher said. But before he could open his Bible, the church door swung open and Marcus Montgomery strode in. "Stop," he said. Everyone turned to stare. Thomas's face darkened with anger. "What are you doing here, Montgomery?" Marcus walked straight to Catherine, his eyes never leaving her face. "I am sorry I did not come sooner. I spent all night thinking, arguing with myself, trying to stay out of it. But I cannot let you do this." Catherine's heart hammered. "Marcus, you do not have to marry him. You have another option." He took her hands in his touch warm and steady. "Marry me instead." The church fell silent. Catherine stared at him in shock. "What? You barely know me." "I know enough. I know you are brave and strong. I know you crossed a continent alone. I know you deserve better than a man who treats you like an inconvenience." His voice dropped lower, intense and sincere. "I know that from the moment I saw you, something changed in me. I have been alone a long time, Catherine. I built my ranch with my own hands. I have a good life, but it is empty. When you arrived, it was like the sun rose after a long winter." "You are insane," Thomas sputtered. "She is my bride. We have a contract." "There is no contract," Agnes Fletcher said firmly. "Just letters. Catherine is a free woman. She can marry whoever she chooses." Marcus squeezed Catherine's hands. "I am not a rich man, but I have a decent ranch and a solid house. I would never treat you with anything but respect. I would build you a life where you are valued and cared for. And I promise you this, you will never walk alone again. Whatever you face, wherever you go, I will be beside you." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "Why? Why would you do this?" "Because you deserve to be loved, Catherine Murphy. And I think, given time, I could love you very much." She looked into his eyes and saw truth there, saw a future that might hold kindness and partnership and maybe even love. Then she looked at Thomas Whitfield's angry red face and saw only bitterness and resentment. The choice was not difficult. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you, Marcus Montgomery." Thomas exploded with rage. "You cannot do this. She came here for me." "Then perhaps you should have come to meet her yourself," Marcus said calmly. "Perhaps you should have treated her with kindness instead of contempt." "Get out of my church if you cannot behave," the preacher said firmly. "Mr. Whitfield, you have been outvoted by love and decency." Thomas stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Catherine felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Marcus turned her to face the preacher, keeping hold of her hand. "If you are willing, sir," the preacher smiled broadly, "it would be my honor to marry two people who clearly belong together." The ceremony was brief and simple. Catherine spoke her vows in a trembling voice, Marcus in a steady one. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Marcus bent and kissed her gently, sweetly, a kiss full of promise. Agnes Fletcher wiped her eyes. "Well, that is the most romantic thing I have seen in 20 years in Montana." Outside the church, Marcus lifted Catherine into his wagon. "We will stop at Whitfield's place to collect your trunk, then head to my ranch." "Our ranch," he corrected himself, smiling. "What if Thomas causes trouble?" "He will not. He is a bully and a coward, but he is not stupid." They drove to the Whitfield ranch, and Marcus retrieved Catherine's trunk while Thomas glowered from the barn. He said nothing, just watched with hateful eyes as they left. As the wagon rolled away, Catherine felt as though she could breathe for the first time in days. She looked at the man beside her husband, and marveled at how her life had changed in the span of an hour. "Are you scared?" Marcus asked. "Terrified," she admitted, "but also hopeful." "Good. I am terrified too. I just proposed to a woman I met 2 days ago." He laughed, the sound rich and warm. "My mother would say I have lost my mind." "Have you?" He looked at her seriously. No, sometimes you just know, Catherine, when something is right, you know. They rode in silence for a while, both processing the enormity of what they had done. Then Marcus turned onto a different path, and the Montgomery Ranch came into view. It was smaller than Whitfield's spread, but infinitely warmer. The cabin was built of solid logs with a wide porch and flower boxes in the windows. Whoever planted those flowers had cared about making a home, not just a shelter. "My mother sent seeds," Marcus said, following her gaze. "I planted them last spring, though I am not much of a gardener." He helped her down from the wagon, and this time when his hands encircled her waist, she was his wife. The thought sent a thrill through her. Inside, the cabin was cozy and well built. The main room held a stone fireplace, a wooden table and chairs, and comfortable furniture. Everything was neat but decidedly masculine. "It needs a woman's touch," Marcus said, looking suddenly uncertain. "I know it is not much. It is wonderful," Catherine said honestly. Compared to Thomas's stark cabin, this place felt like paradise. Marcus carried her trunk to the bedroom, and Catherine saw a large bed with a beautiful quilt. She blushed, thinking about sharing that bed with this man she barely knew. Marcus seemed to sense her thoughts. "Catherine, I want you to know that I will not. That is, we can take our time. I know this is all very sudden. We can wait until you are comfortable." His consideration touched her deeply. "Thank you, Marcus." They spent the rest of the day in careful politeness, learning each other's rhythms. Catherine made supper while Marcus tended to his horses. She discovered his pantry was well stocked, and she made a hearty stew that filled the cabin with delicious smells. Over supper, they talked more than they had since meeting. Marcus told her about building the ranch, about his plans to expand his herd. Catherine told him about her life in Boston, about her father's death and her decision to come west. "Were you very lonely in Boston?" Marcus asked. "Yes. After my father died, I had no one. I worked as a seamstress, but it barely paid for my room. I saw the advertisement for a mail-order bride and thought, why not? What did I have to lose? I am glad you saw it, though I wish it had been my advertisement." "Why did you never marry?" "Surely women here, I was waiting," he said simply. "I did not want to marry just anyone. I wanted to marry someone who understood what it meant to build something from nothing, someone who had strength and courage, someone like you." That night, they lay in the big bed together, both nervous and uncertain. Marcus kept to his side, respecting the space between them. But in the darkness, Catherine reached out and found his hand. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saving me." His fingers curled around hers, warm and strong. "Thank you for saying yes." They fell asleep holding hands, and Catherine dreamed of possibilities. The next days fell into a pattern. Catherine woke early to make breakfast while Marcus tended the livestock. After breakfast, he went out to work the ranch while she kept the house. Her foot made some tasks difficult, but she managed. Marcus never complained, never criticized. Instead, he praised her cooking, thanked her for her efforts, and asked each evening how she was feeling. His constant kindness was almost overwhelming after a lifetime of pity or scorn. In the evenings, they sat together on the porch and talked. Marcus was an excellent listener, asking thoughtful questions and really hearing her answers. Catherine found herself sharing things she had never told anyone, and Marcus did the same. He told her about the war, about the friends he had lost, about the nightmares that still sometimes woke him. She told him about the cruel children who had mocked her foot, about the young men in Boston who had courted her friends but never her. "They were fools," Marcus said fiercely. "Any man who could not see past your foot to the woman you are did not deserve you." Slowly, carefully, they began to build something real. Marcus was endlessly patient, never pushing for more than Catherine was ready to give. But she found herself wanting more. She wanted to close the space between them in bed. She wanted to know what it would be like to be truly his wife. One evening, about 2 weeks after their sudden marriage, Catherine was preparing supper when she heard a horse approach at a gallop. She looked out the window and saw a rider racing toward the cabin. Marcus emerged from the barn, and the rider pulled up beside him. They talked urgently, and then Marcus ran toward the cabin. "Catherine, I have to go. There has been an accident at the Porter Ranch. Jim Porter fell from his roof and is badly hurt. His wife is alone with their children. Several of us are going to help." "Of course. Go." He hesitated. "I might be gone all night. Will you be all right alone?" "I will be fine." "Go help your neighbor." He kissed her forehead quickly, then ran to saddle his horse. Within minutes he was galloping away, leaving Catherine alone on the ranch for the first time. She was not afraid. The cabin was solid, and Marcus had shown her where he kept his rifle. She finished making supper, ate alone, and then cleaned up. As darkness fell, she lit lamps and sat in the rocking chair by the fireplace, reading a book Marcus had on his shelf. Around 10 o'clock, she heard horses outside. Multiple horses. Her heart began to pound. Marcus would not return with others, and certainly not with several riders. She went to the window and saw 3 men dismounting. Even in the darkness, she recognized Thomas Whitfield's thin frame. Fear shot through her. She grabbed the rifle and checked that it was loaded, then positioned herself behind the heavy table. Someone pounded on the door. "Open up, Catherine." Thomas's voice slurred with alcohol. "Go away, Thomas. I just want to talk. You made a fool of me marrying Montgomery. You owe me." "I owe you nothing. Leave or I will shoot." Harsh laughter. "You would not shoot anyone." The door exploded inward as someone kicked it hard. Catherine raised the rifle, her hands shaking. Thomas stumbled in, followed by 2 men Catherine did not recognize. All 3 were clearly drunk. "Put that down before you hurt yourself," Thomas sneered. "Montgomery is not here to protect you. We watched him ride off hours ago. Get out of my house." "Your house? This is Montgomery's house. You are just the cripple he took pity on." Thomas moved closer. "I paid good money bringing you out here. You are going to make that right." Catherine's hand steadied. She aimed the rifle at his chest. "Take one more step and I will shoot you. I am a very good shot, Thomas. My father taught me." This was a lie. She had never fired a rifle in her life. But her voice was cold and steady, and Thomas hesitated. "Come on, Whitfield," one of the other men said nervously. "She has got a gun. This is not worth it." "She is bluffing," Thomas said, but he sounded less certain. Catherine cocked the rifle, the click loud in the tense silence. "Try me." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Thomas spat on the floor and backed toward the door. "You are not worth the trouble anyway. Montgomery is welcome to you." They stumbled out, mounting their horses and riding away into the darkness. Catherine waited until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely before lowering the rifle. Then her legs gave out, and she sank to the floor, shaking violently. She sat there for a long time, trying to calm her racing heart. Finally, she dragged a chair in front of the broken door, positioned the rifle nearby, and sat watching the darkness, waiting for Marcus to return. He came home just before dawn, exhausted and covered in dust. He saw the broken door immediately and was off his horse before it fully stopped, running into the cabin with fear stark on his face. "Catherine, I am here." He found her still sitting in the chair, the rifle across her lap. In an instant he was kneeling beside her, his hands running over her face, her arms checking for injuries. "What happened? Are you hurt? Did someone?" Thomas came. With 2 other men, they were drunk. They broke down the door. Her voice was steady, but her body trembled. Marcus's face went white, then red with rage. "Did they touch you?" "No, I had your rifle. I told them I would shoot if they came closer." "They left." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. Thank God you are safe. I should never have left you alone. I am so sorry, Catherine. You had to help your neighbor. I am fine. But now that he was here, now that she was safe, the fear she had held at bay came flooding back. She began to cry, great shaking sobs, and Marcus held her through it all, murmuring assurances and stroking her hair. When she finally calmed, he pulled back to look at her. You were incredibly brave, but I swear to you, Catherine, Whitfield will pay for this. I am going to. No, she said firmly. No violence. It is over. Let it be over. He broke into our home. He threatened you. And I stopped him. Marcus, please. I do not want you to get hurt or get in trouble with the law. He is not worth it. Marcus's jaw clenched, but he nodded. All right. But I am going to the sheriff today. This will be reported, and I am hiring someone to stay here when I have to be away. You do not need to do that. Yes, I do. I cannot. His voice broke. I cannot bear the thought of something happening to you. Catherine touched his face, feeling the rough stubble under her fingers. I am all right, Marcus. You came home and I am all right. He turned his face into her palm and kissed it. I will fix the door, and tonight I am not leaving your side. He spent the morning repairing the door, making it stronger than before with heavy crossbeams. Then he rode to town to file a report with the sheriff, taking Catherine with him because he refused to leave her alone. The sheriff, a grizzled man named Bill Hardy, took the report seriously. I will have a talk with Whitfield. He is already on thin ice for that brawl last month. One more incident and he will spend time in jail. They stopped at Agnes Fletcher's boarding house, and Agnes exclaimed over the story, hugging Catherine tightly. That man is trash. I am glad you married Marcus instead. On the ride home, Catherine was quiet, processing everything. Marcus glanced at her frequently, concern etched on his face. What are you thinking? He asked finally. That I should have been more frightened than I was, that I should have panicked. But instead, all I could think was that this is my home and no one has the right to take it from me. Marcus smiled, pride and affection warming his eyes. You are extraordinary, Catherine Montgomery. That night after supper, they sat together on the porch watching the sun set behind the mountains. The sky blazed orange and pink, and the air smelled of pine and summer grass. Catherine, Marcus said quietly, I need to tell you something. She turned to look at him. When I saw that broken door this morning, when I thought something might have happened to you, I realized something. He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. I am in love with you. Catherine's heart stopped, then raced. Marcus, I know it has only been 2 weeks. I know it is too soon to say such things. But it is true. Somewhere between lifting you into that wagon and watching you face down 3 drunk men with a rifle, I fell completely in love with you. Catherine felt tears spill down her cheeks. I was so afraid you would only ever see me as an obligation, a woman you married out of duty. Never. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. You are no obligation. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. I love you too, she whispered. I think I started falling in love with you the moment you called me brave. He kissed her then, not the gentle kiss of their wedding, but a kiss full of passion and promise. Catherine melted into him, her hands gripping his shoulders, and felt the last walls between them crumble. That night, they became truly husband and wife in every sense. Marcus was gentle and patient, making sure Catherine felt safe and cherished. And when they lay tangled together afterward, Catherine thought she had never been so happy. I promised you that you would never walk alone again, Marcus murmured against her hair. But you have given me so much more than companionship, Catherine. You have given me a reason to build something bigger than a ranch. You have given me a future worth living. The summer passed in golden happiness. Catherine transformed the cabin into a true home, adding curtains and decorations, planting a vegetable garden that flourished under her care. Her foot still pained her, but Marcus built her a special stool that allowed her to sit while doing kitchen work, easing the strain. They fell into an easy partnership. Marcus taught her to ride a gentle mare named Daisy, adapting the stirrups to accommodate her foot. Catherine learned to help with some of the ranch work, feeding chickens and gathering eggs, tending the garden, even helping Marcus with bookkeeping. But more than the work, they built a life of joy. They laughed together, talked for hours, made love with increasing passion and comfort. Marcus was endlessly inventive in showing his love, leaving wildflowers on her pillow, singing to her in the evenings, dancing with her in the kitchen despite her uneven gait. "You are a beautiful dancer," he insisted when she protested that she could not dance properly. "I am clumsy and awkward." "You are perfect." He held her close, moving slowly to a tune only he could hear. "And you will never convince me otherwise." Thomas Whitfield left them alone after the sheriff's warning, though Catherine sometimes saw him in town and felt his hateful stare. But he never approached, and gradually her fear of him faded. In September, Catherine realized she had missed her monthly courses. At first, she thought it was the change in climate or the physical demands of ranch life. But when a second month passed and she began feeling nauseated in the mornings, she knew. She was pregnant. Catherine was simultaneously thrilled and terrified. She had always wanted children but had never believed she would have them. Now, carrying Marcus's child, she worried. Would her clubfoot affect the baby? Would she be able to care for a child properly with her limited mobility? She decided to wait to tell Marcus until she was certain, but Marcus knew her too well. One morning when she rushed outside to be sick, he held her hair back and then looked at her with dawning wonder. "Catherine, are you?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I am sorry. I know we have only been married a few months. I know it is too soon." Too soon. He laughed incredulously and swept her into his arms, spinning her around despite her protests. "This is the best news I have ever received. We are going to have a baby." His joy was infectious. Catherine found herself laughing through her tears, and they held each other in the morning light, marveling at the new life growing between them. Marcus became even more protective, insisting Catherine rest more and take on fewer physical tasks. He hired a young man from town, Daniel Carter, to help with ranch work so Marcus could spend more time close to the cabin. As Catherine's belly grew, Marcus talked to the baby every night, his hands gentle on her swollen abdomen. He built a cradle from beautiful pine wood, sanding it until it was smooth as silk. He rode to Helena and returned with soft blankets and tiny clothes, his face glowing with excitement. "What if something goes wrong?" Catherine asked one night, voicing the fear that haunted her. "What if my foot means something is wrong with the baby?" Marcus took her hands firmly. "Then we will love that baby with everything we have, just as I love you. Catherine, there is nothing wrong with you. Your foot does not define you. It is simply part of you, like your beautiful blue eyes or your kind heart. And if our child has any challenges, we will face them together." His absolute confidence calmed her fears. Winter came to Montana, blanketing the ranch in white. Catherine stayed close to the fire, knitting tiny garments and reading to her unborn child. Marcus insisted on doing most of the outdoor work himself, refusing to let Catherine risk falling on the ice. On a frigid night in February 1879, Catherine's labor began. Marcus rode through a snowstorm to fetch the midwife, a capable woman named Ruth Simmons who had delivered half the babies in the territory. The labor was long and difficult. Catherine's twisted foot made positioning challenging, and there were moments when Ruth looked worried. But Marcus never left her side, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, encouraging her through every contraction. "You are the strongest person I know," he said fiercely when Catherine sobbed that she could not do it anymore. "You faced down Thomas Whitfield with a rifle. You crossed the continent alone. You can do this, Catherine. You can do anything." And somehow she found the strength. With a final tremendous push, their son entered the world squalling and perfect. "A boy," Ruth announced, placing the baby on Catherine's chest. "A healthy, beautiful boy." Catherine looked down at her son through tears of joy and exhaustion. He had Marcus's strong features and a surprising amount of dark hair, and when the midwife examined him thoroughly, she pronounced him completely healthy. "His feet are perfect," Ruth said with a smile, knowing Catherine's fears. Marcus leaned over them both, his face wet with tears. "He is beautiful. You are amazing. I love you so much." They named him Matthew Marcus Montgomery, and he became the center of their universe. Marcus was a devoted father, walking the floor with Matthew at night so Catherine could rest, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours just staring at his son in wonder. Catherine discovered that her foot was barely an impediment in caring for Matthew. She learned to sit in the rocking chair to nurse him, to carry him in a sling that distributed his weight comfortably. And Marcus was always there to help, never making her feel inadequate. Spring came, and they took Matthew outside to see the ranch that would one day be his. Catherine carried him to the garden she was replanting, showing him the seedlings pushing through the earth. "Your father built all of this," she told the baby, "and someday you will help him make it even better." One afternoon in May, they had unexpected visitors. Agnes Fletcher arrived in her wagon, accompanied by a young woman who looked vaguely familiar. "Catherine, Marcus," Agnes called. "I have brought someone to meet you." The young woman stepped down from the wagon, and Catherine realized she had seen her before in Helena. Her name was Sarah, and she had arrived as a mail-order bride for a minor last fall. "I heard what you did," Sarah said shyly to Catherine. "How you chose Marcus instead of Thomas Whitfield. It gave me courage to leave my situation too. The man who sent for me was cruel and dangerous. So I left and found work at the boarding house. I just wanted to thank you. Your bravery inspired mine." Catherine was deeply moved. "I am so glad you are safe. Do you plan to return east?" "No, I like Montana. Agnes is teaching me to run the boarding house. And there is a nice man, a clerk at the general store, who has asked permission to court me." She blushed prettily. They invited Sarah and Agnes to stay for dinner, and the evening was filled with laughter and stories. As Catherine watched Marcus hold Matthew while talking with their guests, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. 2 years ago, she had been alone in Boston, struggling to survive, believing she would never know love or family. Now she had a husband who cherished her, a beautiful son, a home and friends. Her clubfoot, which had defined her whole life, felt like an insignificant detail in the grand tapestry of her happiness. The seasons turned. Matthew grew from a baby into a toddler, then a bright, energetic boy. Catherine became pregnant again when Matthew was 2, and this time the pregnancy was easier. She gave birth to a daughter they named Caroline Ruth, after Catherine and the midwife who had helped bring both children into the world. Marcus expanded the ranch, buying more land and cattle. With Daniel's help and occasional hired hands during busy seasons, the Montgomery Ranch became one of the most successful in the area. But Marcus never let work consume him. He always made time for his family, teaching Matthew to ride, reading stories to Caroline, stealing kisses from Catherine in the kitchen. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Marcus took Catherine to the spot where they had first driven together, when he had brought her to Thomas Whitfield's ranch. "Do you remember this place?" he asked, helping her down from the wagon. Of course. This is where you told me I was brave. It is where I fell in love with you, though I did not recognize it yet. He turned her to face him, his hands warm on her shoulders. 5 years ago, I saw a woman step off a stagecoach, and my whole world changed. You were trying so hard to be strong, to hide your pain, to face an uncertain future with dignity. And I thought, that is the most remarkable person I have ever seen. I was terrified, Catherine admitted. Of Thomas, of Montana, of everything. But you did it anyway. That is what courage is. He pulled a small box from his pocket. I never gave you a proper wedding ring. We got married so quickly and I had nothing prepared, but I have been saving and I wanted to give you this. He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold band with 3 small diamonds. Marcus, it is beautiful, but you should not have spent. Yes, I should have. You are my wife, the mother of my children, the love of my life. You deserve all the beautiful things. He slipped it onto her finger beside the simple band she already wore. Thank you for saying yes that day in the church. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for seeing me, Catherine whispered, for seeing past my foot to who I really am. Your foot is part of you, Catherine. I do not love you despite it. I love all of you, including the things you see as flaws. He pulled her close. You taught me that strength comes in many forms, that walking with a limp does not mean you cannot run toward your dreams, that the bravest journeys are the ones we take when we are afraid. They held each other as the sun set over the Montana mountains, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built a love that would last forever. Years passed in contentment. Matthew and Caroline grew strong and healthy, learning to work the ranch alongside their parents. Marcus taught Matthew everything about cattle and horses, while Catherine taught both children reading, writing, and arithmetic at the kitchen table. When Matthew was 7, he asked about his mother's foot. Why do you walk differently than other people, Mama? Catherine had known this question would come. She sat down and explained about being born with a clubfoot, about the pain and limitations it caused. Does it hurt all the time? Matthew asked with concern. Sometimes, but I am used to it. When I grow up, I will be a doctor and fix your foot, he announced seriously. Marcus, who had been listening from across the room, came over and ruffled his son's hair. Your mama does not need fixing, son. She is perfect exactly as she is. But it hurts her. Many things in life hurt. That does not mean we are broken. Marcus looked at Catherine with so much love it made her breath catch. Your mother is the strongest person I know. Her foot has taught her compassion and resilience. It has made her who she is. Matthew considered this, then hugged Catherine tightly. I think you are strong too, Mama. Caroline, who was 5 and adored her mother, added, You are beautiful, Mama, the most beautiful mother in Montana. Catherine's eyes filled with happy tears. Her children did not see her as handicapped or limited. They simply saw their mother, who loved them and cared for them, who was present in their lives in all the ways that mattered. When the children were in bed that night, Catherine and Marcus sat on their porch as they had countless times before. The ranch spread out before them, prosperous and peaceful. You ever regret it? Catherine asked. Marrying me so impulsively, taking on a wife with a clubfoot and all the challenges that entails. Marcus turned to her with surprise. Regret? Catherine, marrying you was the best decision I ever made. The only thing I regret is that I did not put my own advertisement for a mail-order bride, so you would have come to me directly instead of to Whitfield. If I had gone directly to you, you might not have fallen in love with me so dramatically, she teased. Oh, I would have fallen in love with you no matter what. Maybe it would have taken 3 days instead of 2, but it was inevitable. He pulled her close. You are my heart, Catherine. You and the children are my whole world. More years passed. They added a third child, another son named Michael, and Catherine thought their family was complete. The ranch continued to thrive. Matthew showed a natural talent for working with horses, while Caroline had her mother's gentle nature and love of learning. Michael was still young but showed signs of his father's quiet strength. Thomas Whitfield's ranch eventually failed, and he left Montana in disgrace. Catherine felt no satisfaction at his downfall, only relief that he was gone. The territory was changing. More settlers arrived, towns grew, and the wild, rough edges of Montana began to smooth. But the Montgomery Ranch remained a constant, a place of hard work and deep love. On their 10th anniversary, Marcus surprised Catherine with a trip to Helena for a proper celebration. They left the children with Agnes Fletcher, who had become a beloved honorary grandmother, and spent 2 nights at the hotel. Marcus took Catherine to a restaurant where they ate steak and danced to a small band. Catherine's foot still made dancing awkward, but Marcus moved with her slowly, gracefully, making her feel like the most elegant woman in the room. 10 years, he mused as they swayed together. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you stepped off that stagecoach. Other times it feels like you have been in my life forever. I cannot imagine my life without you, Catherine said. Everything I am, everything I have become, is because you saw value in me when no one else did. That is not true. You always had value, Catherine. I just had the privilege of recognizing it. They went back to their hotel room and made love with the practiced ease of long familiarity, but also with the passion that had never dimmed between them. Afterward, lying in Marcus's arms, Catherine thought about the scared young woman who had arrived in Montana 10 years ago. That woman had been broken, defeated, expecting only a cold marriage of convenience. She could never have imagined this life of love and abundance. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Marcus's voice was sleepy and content. "For keeping your promise. You said I would never walk alone again, and I have not. You have been beside me every step of the way." His arms tightened around her. "Always, Catherine, always." The years rolled on. The children grew into young adults. Matthew became a skilled rancher, taking on more and more responsibility. Caroline fell in love with the son of a neighboring rancher, a kind young man named Peter Johnson, and they married when she was 20. When Caroline had her first child, a daughter named Catherine after her grandmother, Catherine Montgomery held the baby and marveled at the circle of life. She was a grandmother now, her own children starting families. "Your granddaughter has your eyes," Marcus said, looking at the baby. "And your grandfather's strength," Catherine told the infant. "He built all of this for you, little one. Everything you see he built with his own hands and his own determination." Marcus, now in his 50s with gray streaking his honey-colored hair, smiled. "I built it for you," he corrected. "All of this was for you and our family." Matthew married a few years later, bringing his bride to live on the ranch. Together, they had 2 sons who tore around the property with boundless energy. Michael, the youngest, showed an interest in medicine and went east to study, though he promised to return to Montana. Catherine's hair turned gray, and her clubfoot pained her more as she aged. There were days when walking was difficult, when she spent most of her time in her rocking chair. But Marcus was always there, bringing her tea, massaging her twisted foot, reading to her in the evenings. "We are getting old," she said one evening, watching the sunset from their porch. "We are getting lucky," Marcus corrected. "Not everyone gets to grow old with the love of their life." He was right. Catherine looked back on her life with profound gratitude. She had been given so much more than she had ever hoped for. A husband who loved her completely, children and grandchildren who filled her days with joy, a home she had helped build. On their 25th anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration. Matthew and his family, Caroline and hers, even Michael came home from his medical studies. Agnes Fletcher, now in her 80s but still sharp as a tack, made the journey from town. They set up tables outside, and Catherine watched her family with a full heart. Her grandchildren ran and played, her children were healthy and happy, and Marcus sat beside her holding her hand as he had for 25 years. Matthew stood and raised his glass. To my parents. They taught me what love looks like, what commitment means, and how to build something that lasts. Everything I am is because of them. Caroline added, her voice thick with emotion, "Mama, you showed me that strength is not about physical perfection. You showed me how to face challenges with grace and courage. Papa, you showed me what a good man looks like, and because of you, I knew to look for those qualities in my husband." Michael, home for only a few days, spoke last. "In medical school, I have learned about anatomy and diseases and treatments. But the most important thing I know about healing, I learned from you both. I learned that love is the greatest medicine, that being seen and valued can heal wounds that doctors cannot touch. Mama, when I become a physician, I will treat every patient with the same respect and dignity that Papa has always shown you." Catherine could not speak through her tears, so Marcus spoke for both of them. "Your mother and I have been blessed beyond measure. We found each other by chance, or by providence, and we built a life that exceeded our wildest dreams. If we taught you anything worthwhile, it is that love is a choice you make every day. It is not always easy, but it is always worth it." The celebration continued late into the night, with music and dancing and laughter. Marcus helped Catherine to her feet for one dance, moving with her slowly across the grass as the sun set behind the mountains. "You remember our wedding?" Catherine asked. "Every moment. You in your gray silk dress, looking terrified and brave. The way you said yes to me, even though I was practically a stranger. The way we started our life together. Best decision I ever made." "Second best," Marcus corrected with a smile. "The best was stepping off that stagecoach in the first place. If you had stayed in Boston, we never would have found each other. I think we would have found each other somehow. Some things are meant to be." They danced until Catherine's foot could not support her anymore, and then Marcus carried her to a chair, sitting beside her and watching their family with satisfaction. Years continued to pass. Catherine's mobility decreased, and eventually she needed a cane to walk even short distances. Her clubfoot, which had always pained her, became a constant ache, but she never complained. She had lived a full, rich life, far beyond anything she had imagined possible. Marcus adapted everything for her comfort. He built ramps so she did not have to navigate steps. He carried her whenever she needed it, never making her feel like a burden. He was still the same man who had lifted her into a wagon 30 years ago and promised she would never walk alone. On a spring morning in 1908, Catherine woke feeling unusually tired. She was 73 years old, and Marcus was 78. They had been married for 30 years, had raised 3 children, and had 7 grandchildren. "I do not feel well," she told Marcus. He immediately sent for Michael, who had indeed returned to Montana and set up a medical practice in Helena. Michael came quickly, examining his mother with professional care but filial concern. "Her heart is weak," he told Marcus privately. "I do not think she has much time." Marcus refused to accept this. "There must be something we can do. Medicine, treatment, something." Michael's eyes filled with tears. "Papa, Mama has lived a long, full life. Her body is simply tired. The best thing we can do is make her comfortable and let her know she is loved." They moved Catherine to the big bed she had shared with Marcus for 30 years. The family gathered. Matthew came with his wife and sons. Caroline came with her husband and daughters. Michael stayed, monitoring his mother but knowing there was little he could do. Catherine drifted in and out of consciousness, but she was not afraid. She had lived well and loved deeply. She had no regrets. Marcus never left her side. He held her hand, stroked her hair, and talked to her about their life together. "You remember the day we met?" he asked softly. "I saw you trying to climb into that wagon, and I thought you were the most determined person I had ever seen. I could not stop thinking about you. That night, I tried to convince myself to stay out of it, to let you marry Whitfield as planned. But I could not do it. I had to give you another choice." Catherine squeezed his hand weakly. "Best choice I ever made. You have given me 30 years of happiness, Catherine. You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to build something beautiful. You took a lonely cowboy and made him the richest man in Montana. I love you," she whispered. "I love you too, so much." He leaned close, his voice breaking. "I do not know how to do this without you." "You will," she assured him. "You are the strongest person I know, and you will not be alone. You have our children and grandchildren. They will help you." As the sun set on that spring day, Catherine Montgomery took her last breath surrounded by her family. Marcus held her hand, tears streaming down his weathered face, and thanked her for the incredible gift of her love. The funeral was attended by seemingly everyone in the territory. Catherine had touched many lives with her kindness and courage. Agnes Fletcher, now 91 and frail, came to pay her respects to the woman she had befriended 30 years ago. "She was extraordinary," Agnes told Marcus. "She came here scared and alone, and she built something beautiful." "You both did." Marcus buried Catherine on a hill overlooking the ranch beneath a large pine tree. He had a beautiful headstone made that read, "Catherine Montgomery, 1835–1908. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She walked through life with courage and grace. She never walked alone." The months after Catherine's death were the darkest of Marcus's life. He moved through his days mechanically, doing what needed to be done but finding no joy in it. The ranch that he had built for her felt empty without her presence. But gradually, his children and grandchildren pulled him back to life. Matthew needed his advice on ranch decisions. Caroline needed help with her youngest daughter. Michael consulted him on patients who needed more than medical care, and Marcus realized that Catherine lived on in all of them. He saw her kindness in Caroline, her determination in Matthew, her compassion in Michael. He saw her in his grandchildren's smiles and in the values they carried. He lived for another 8 years after Catherine's death, dying peacefully in his sleep at the age of 86. His children buried him beside Catherine, and the whole territory mourned a man who had embodied integrity and love. Matthew took over the ranch, running it successfully and eventually passing it to his own sons. Caroline's children grew up hearing stories about their grandmother, who had crossed the continent alone, and their grandfather who had given her a new life. The Montgomery Ranch remained in the family for generations, a testament to what two people could build when they loved each other completely. And every year on their wedding anniversary, the Montgomery family gathered at the graves on the hill to remember Marcus and Catherine, the couple who had found each other against all odds and created a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone. The story of the mail-order bride with a clubfoot and the cowboy who promised she would never walk alone became part of Montana folklore, told and retold as an example of true love and courage. Young couples would visit the Montgomery graves, touching the headstones and hoping some of that enduring love would bless their own marriages. Because Marcus and Catherine had proven that love was not about perfection. It was about seeing someone completely, accepting them fully, and choosing them daily. It was about keeping promises even when it was hard, about standing beside each other through every challenge. Catherine Murphy had arrived in Montana expecting a loveless marriage of convenience. Instead, she found a man who saw her strength, valued her courage, and loved her completely. Marcus Montgomery had been a lonely cowboy building a ranch in the wilderness. Then he met a woman who made him understand what he was really building: a home, a family, a legacy. Together, they created something extraordinary. Not just a successful ranch or beautiful children, but a love story that would inspire generations. They proved that the bravest act is to open your heart to love, even when you are scared. That the greatest strength is vulnerability. That the most beautiful journey is the one you take with the person you love. And that when you find someone who sees you truly and loves you completely, you will never have to walk alone again. Not through challenges, not through pain, not through life. You will always have a hand to hold, a shoulder to lean on, a heart that beats in rhythm with yours. Marcus and Catherine Montgomery walked through life together for 30 years, and then Marcus walked the rest of his journey sustained by her memory and their legacy. In the end, his promise held true. Catherine never walked alone, not even in death, because their love transcended mortality. Their story ended not with sadness but with celebration, a life well lived and a love that changed the landscape of Montana itself, one heart at a time.